His birthday is in August, and he will be 25 years old. So you have to think about that. As a sixth-year player, he will be one of the older prospects in this class.
He's older than Sam Darnold.
He's older than Matt Stafford. You remember the Matt Stafford one?
Yes.
I want to hear from the people in the chat. Who's the crazy one that you hear where it's like, this player is still younger than this player?
I can't think of that. I know what you're talking about, but when the Bills took, the linebacker they took that signed with the Bears.
Oh, Tremaine Edmunds.
Tremaine Edmunds is, I think he had just turned 20. He's one of the youngest prospects I ever remember. Tremaine Edmunds is still 26. It feels like he's been in the NFL for 14 years. He's 26. Is that not insane? He was drafted in 2018.
That's crazy. That's pretty much as young as it gets for you getting drafted in the NFL.
Where you got to wait like 2 years to have a drink. Your teammates are going out after a win and you got to like...
Water with lemon.
It's not, you can't even get into the club.
Water with lemon outside.
Unbelievable. He's like, that was a first round pick.
Welcome to the opening bell of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Trevor Sikkema, Connor Rogers here with you guys with a very exciting positional ranking episode. Today we're talking interior defensive linemen. If you heard us or really any other draft analysts out there tease the rankings here for this class in the interior defensive line, you know it's stacked. This is where one of the strengths of the 2025 NFL draft lie, and I'm excited to break it down. We're going to give you each our top 15s, reveal them to one another for the first time. If this is your first time watching these episodes, we do the rankings, and I have no idea who Connor has in his top 15 or the order, which always makes for a fun show. Connor, I feel like our chemistry is going to be on point since we are matching color-wise here for this show. Didn't plan this. Just want everybody to know.
Yes, we did.
You're right, we did. It's the uniform. We're like, all right, what uniform are we wearing today for the podcast?
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's good to be equally as handsome with you here, my friend.
Yes, this is phenomenal. We are dressed to impress for maybe the best position group of the entire draft. We sunk weeks into this. Literally,
Jeez,
we were talking about this at least the week before the Super Bowl. And we had hoped to record this during Super Bowl week. We already went through the whole hamster on a wheel Wi-Fi situation and it was a lot going on. We're like, let's go home. We'll give ourselves a couple extra days. And it was worth it because we're each going to do top 15s and we watch more players than that. So we'll talk about maybe a couple guys on the outside looking in. And we were kind of joking before we even press record. We didn't even finish. We didn't even come close to finishing this group. So this is another early positional rankings. But I think you'll see, God, it feels like at least 30 draftable D-line in this class. I wouldn't be surprised if this group exceeds that.
Yeah. So, you told me that you watched 18 total interior defensive linemen. I got to 20. And to be honest with you, there's an easy 4, 5, 6 guys that I didn't get to yet that I really want to. Now, right. I watched a lot of the names that I figured were going to be in my top 15 for this episode. But hey, a guy that I could watch who I haven't watched yet, maybe they'll sneak in. Maybe they would be somewhere between like 12 to 15, something like that when it's all said and done. But we think that we got the majority of these guys. Now, to start this podcast and preface it, what I want to do is sort of explain to you guys and be transparent with you with sort of where I'm coming from for this episode, because we're on the cusp of doing something really, really cool at PFF. And that is really categorizing players at positions that are even more detailed than just, okay, for example, they're a wide receiver. Well, what kind of a wide receiver are they? Are they an X receiver? Are they a Z? Are they a slot? When it comes to offensive line, are they a zone blocking offensive lineman, a man/gap scheme blocking offensive lineman? When it comes to pass rushers, edge rushers, are you more of a 4-3 hand in the dirt? Are you more of a stand-up outside linebacker? And then specifically for this episode here, interior defensive line, to me, can mean 3 different subcategories of the position. Nose tackle, 3 technique defensive tackle, and 3-4 defensive end. And so I have split how I rank and grade these players on film into those 3 categories. Now, Connor and I were chatting before the show. I was kind of getting him caught up on all that. And like him, for a long time, I have always noted these in my scouting reports, but now I'm truly contextualizing exactly what these guys do well, and my grading for them is different. The reason why we're doing that is because at PFF, we're trying to give you more, contextual scouting reports on players to potentially even give you some team big boards, hopefully this season. I'd love to get into that. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, for example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, do they need a defensive tackle? Well, I don't know. They don't need just any defensive tackle. You don't just need like any nose tackle. Okay, they want more of a 3 technique penetrating defensive tackle or something like that. I'm just making this up off the top of my head, but we're trying to do things even more detailed, even more team specific when it comes to our rankings here. And I know that's kind of a long spiel, but I wanted to say that to you guys because I merged all 3 categories into my top 15, which we'll talk about here on the show. But you're going to hear me reference, okay, I may have this guy ranked 11th, for example, but he's my 3rd best 3-4 defensive end. So if you're a team that's running an odd front and you're watching or listening to the show and you're thinking, okay, that's the kind of player we would want, you got to think, I'll probably have that player higher on like a team specific big board when we start to talk about a lot more of those things in March and April when we get there. So that's sort of an exciting change that we're going through at PFF that I'm very excited about and sort of introing here on the show, but wanted to make sure I said that up front because I'm going to be referencing that throughout the show.
I think it's phenomenal. I think it's so important. I didn't realize this until I started ranking over 200 or 250 players, how it's so difficult sometimes to have that context, right?
Yeah,
where you're watching
totally.
a guy. I really realized this when I do obviously a lot of Jet specific stuff and a lot of then draft national perspective stuff. And you really realize you'll be watching a player and you're like, God, I love this guy. Like, I think he's a, 3rd round pick. And then you realize there are teams that would never take him. They would never take him. And it's okay to have rankings like we do, right? Top 15. This is just by the best players. But I sit in that, like when I write my synopsis line, you got to paint the picture of what a guy is. 100%. Is he a nose tackle, shade nose tackle? Like you said, Trev, is he a 3-4 defensive end? Is he going to be a stand-up rusher that I could probably only play him on passing downs right now? The context of what a player is and what schemes he fits and how he fits and how to maximize his talent, especially on the defensive line group, is so, so important that it's fun to sit here and do the top 15s. And we're really lucky that we get to do it from the broad picture. Like, hey, we're the GM of every team in this situation. But I do think it's great for the listener to show what the guy's actual role will be.
Yeah. And obviously, we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? You and I have talked about that's sort of how we've done scouting for a long time, making sure that we note that in these guys' final evals too. I think you put it beautifully, paint the correct picture of who this player could be at the NFL level. We're just getting more purposeful with it in how we categorize these players. And when we get to the PFF draft guide and we start doing team specific top 100s and things like that, this is the stuff that's going to go into it, these subcategories of exactly where these guys are ranked. So with all that being said, let's get right to it. Let's do as we always do. Start at number 15. Let's go 15 through 11. Connor, I'll have you read those guys off, and then we'll sort of pick a couple of guys and chat about it there.
So 15 for me, Kentucky's Deone Walker, which I'm sure we'll have a long combo about that. 14, Joshua Farmer from Florida State.
Okay.
13, Jordan Phillips from Maryland. 12, Omarr Norman-Lott from Tennessee, which, man, having Omarr Norman-Lott at 12 just shows you how ridiculous this class is with the kind of year this guy had. I mean, my goodness.
Yep.
And then 11, when I say favorite, I don't mean the best. There's something about him you love. Maybe my favorite defensive player in the draft, Jamaree Caldwell from Oregon.
Damn, he was the next guy on my list. I didn't even get to him. When you told me that
before we started recording, I was like, it'll be really good for the final rankings. I'll talk about Caldwell here in a bit. And ironically, Trevor, he was the last guy I watched for this exercise. He was literally out of 18 players. He was the last guy I watched. I'll talk about it in a moment. He is just perplexing at 342 pounds, the things he could do. It's amazing. So I honestly wanted to have him even higher than 11. Just goes to show you how good this class is.
So a lot of the names are sort of similar in our list, and I'm actually kind of surprised how similar they are here. But let's start with Caldwell because he's the one guy who I don't have on my list, who you do. And you said that he was just very unique. He was a player that is probably going to be obviously not the best. He's not quite in your top 10, but a favorite of yours as we go throughout this draft process, and somebody that you'll probably talk about a lot on radio or TV appearance where they go, who's one of your guys? It feels like, am I saying that correctly, that he's probably going to be one of those guys for you?
Without a doubt, man. He's, to put it in perspective, like we all have that one friend that's jumbo sized. And at the wedding or college, whatever it was, somehow they're a better dancer than everyone else. They move better than everyone else. Like you look at them and you're just like, how do you do it? That's watching Jamaree Caldwell. 6'2".
I'm so mad I didn't get to this guy.
342 pounds. He's sawed off. He's got 32.25-inch arms, so he doesn't have long arms.
All right.
He is, and here's the thing, this year, 0 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, 22 hurries. He did knock down 4 passes. He had a forced fumble. In 2023 with Houston, he had 6.5 sacks. So he's gotten to the quarterback before. I think with Oregon, a little bit different role, how blue collar they needed him to be. I mean, incredibly beefy head to toe, true nose tackle, like true, I can 2-gap, I can eat space, I can clog, I can make life easier for everyone else around me. He's shockingly quick off the ball. And I think that I really opened my eyes to it at the Senior Bowl, where I'm like, that is one of the biggest humans on the field, and he's flying off the ball. And you turn on the tape, and it's the same thing. He's got a deep bag of pass rush moves. Like, this guy tries stuff. I think you see a better array of those moves at Houston because he's somebody that, once again, like at Oregon, they really needed him to be like the meat and potatoes in the middle kind of guy. But he's got really, really active hands. They're always fighting through the rush. And he's really smart where when he has a free hand through the rush and he knows that time has kind of run out, he gets his arm up into passing lanes. That's how he knocked down 4 passes this year. He makes it really difficult for quarterbacks to kind of throw through those windows. You watch the tape against Wisconsin, the run defense snaps, it's elite run clogging, like as good as you'll see from any player in this entire draft this year. He has that kind of size and anchor ability to just be a force in the middle that you're not going to move me. I'm not always going to shoot off the ball and, be this 7-sack kind of player, but you are not going to move me. Obviously, the length is very, very limited. The pass rush production did dip a little bit this year, but Caldwell is, to go back to your opening statement on this thing, he is a true nose tackle, and I can put him on the field on rundowns right away, but I saw some juice as a rusher that he's not a 0 in that department. I'm fascinated to see what he can develop in that area because he tries things. He's got active hands, but I just love the size. I actually am kind of fascinated, and I understand Deone Walker is 5 inches taller, but it's fascinating to me nobody talks about Caldwell and his size and mass, and everybody's infatuated with Walker's when Caldwell uses his much better.
Honestly, until you got to the end there where you started to talk about pass rush a little bit, I was like, you sure you're not reading Kenneth Grant's scouting report? You sure you didn't mix those up? You talked about the dancer's feet, how well he moves for a guy his size. He's a great run defender. So as somebody who really only saw him at the Senior Bowl, and what I saw at the Senior Bowl, I really, really liked. I have not gotten to him yet. Honestly, the second this episode stops, I'm going to watch him, and I'm going to text you, or I'm going to put in the comments here on this episode whenever it drops, be like, all right, this is where I would have Caldwell. So, all right, maybe it's not exactly after that because we're recording this one late, but it'll come soon. That sounds like a player that I would be extremely interested in. Obviously, the arm length is somewhat of an issue, but when you play as an interior defensive lineman, if you're playing the nose tackle position, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's really not. So, man, that's exciting. Just to hear you talk about Caldwell like that is super exciting. So we have a couple of guys who are in similar spots, actually, the exact same spots, which I'm kind of shocked about. So I want to read my 15 through 11 and then pick out a couple that we need to talk about here. 15, I also have Deone Walker.
What are the odds of that?
It does not stop there, brother.
This is ridiculous.
14, I have Elijah Roberts from SMU. So
I didn't get to see him yet.
I do want to talk about him because some people might be like, hold up, whoa. I thought this is the interior defensive line episode. I'll get to that in a second because I do think he is a 3-4 defensive end, which I categorize as an interior position. So I have him at number 14. Number 13, I have Jordan Phillips. Number 12, I have Omarr Norman-Lott.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
And then number 11, I have Alfred Collins from Texas. So we'll talk about Alfred Collins a little bit more in a second. I do want to touch briefly on Walker, Phillips, and Omarr Norman-Lott, sort of where we have them because we have them in the same spots. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about Elijah Roberts, who was one of the highest graded defensive linemen that we had at PFF this past season. And when you look at the 2-year sample size, because we talk about that here a lot on this show, 2-year sample sizes mean a lot because the bigger the sample size, the more of a projectable kind of picture that you have for a lot of these players. Roberts, first of all, 4-star defensive end from Miami, Florida, commits to Miami out of high school, dreamed of playing for the Hurricanes, ended up staying there for 3 years, and he played in 20 games, but he only had 1 start while he was at Miami. So he transfers over to SMU. He's a 2-year starter for them in the 2023 and 2024 season. He was a second-team all-conference player that first year, honorable mention this past season. This is over the last 2 years, okay? 92.7 pass rush grade. 94.0 pass rush grade on true pass sets. 22.1 pass rush win percentage. That's 99th percentile for where he's playing. And then the run defense grades are good as well. 84.3 over the last 2 years. He has a 0.30 wins above replacement average, which is very high for an interior defensive lineman. So an extremely productive player. And the measurables kind of say to me that he's more of a 3-4 defensive end than he is an edge rusher. 6'3 1/4. That's 43rd percentile for those one gapping defensive ends. But then he's 290 pounds. He has almost 34-inch arm length, and he's got massive hands. So when you watch this dude line up at SMU, he'll often be in a 3-point or 4-point stance, but his feet will be square. His shoulders will be completely square. His body will be completely square to the line of scrimmage in that 4-eye technique just inside of where the offensive tackle is. And he wins so much with power. He has got a dense body. Go watch, I think it's the BYU game for him. Let me check. Was that the first game I watched? Yeah, the BYU game. You watch the first quarter of the BYU game and you go, oh, these offensive tackles aren't ready for Elijah Roberts. And there are so many times when it looks like he barely touches him, but he's got so much strength. These offensive tackles even are going flying. He's actually got a decent amount of pass rush moves as well. He just doesn't finish them as well as he could. So he's got that in his bag. He just needs a little bit more of a pass rusher's mentality here. I would say he's explosive, especially for his size, in a linear, get up the field first step context. But I wouldn't say he's twitchy. You know, like I don't see that like quick twitch for him in a lot of the other movements. So he's explosive, but he's not twitchy. And again, that's also why I don't think his best place at the NFL is just going to be as this 4-3 outside edge type of a player. I think he'll be best when you can move him inside and play him in the inside shoulder of the offensive tackle. So when you do that, I think he gives you the plus size. He's got the strength to him. My sort of bottom line scouting report for Roberts, who I also really loved at the Shrine Bowl as well. One of the best players that we had all week at Shrine Bowl practices. Roberts is a strong, well-built defensive lineman who has a lot of experience at different alignments. He likely lacks the length and the twitch and the bend to be a full-time edge player, but his size and versatility could play well as a 3-4 defensive end, and he can move along those gaps there. So I see him sort of as an interior player along that regard, but I ended up having him at number 14 there.
Somebody that I'm excited to see. I got to see him play throughout the year on broadcast, but I have not done the deep dive on the film yet, and now going in with I kind of expected to watch him for our final edge rankings, and you have him here on the IDL rankings. So going to be kind of interesting to see how that stacks up. These players that are in between like that, and full transparency, like for this exercise, I watched both Shemar Turner and Shemar Stewart for this one.
Yeah.
It's just projecting what they're good at, like you did in this instance, to an NFL role.
Yeah. Which is funny, right? It kind of goes into what we were talking about at the top of the show. Shemar Stewart, Shemar Turner, two players who are playing on the same team, same defensive line. They're two totally different players.
Yes.
But traditionally, you categorize them as like these interior defensive linemen. And so, you know, obviously through this exercise and beyond, we're trying to be a little bit more contextual in how we think they're going to play at the NFL level. So I had Roberts as my second best 3-4 defensive end here in this class. Deone Walker was third. He was my third best. And, just for people to know, Riley Mills from Notre Dame was fourth on this list. So I have four defensive ends ranked. I didn't get to the final scouting report for Ty Robinson, but I believe he would be the fifth. He'd be in fifth place here from what I saw in the middle of the season, the guy from Nebraska. But let's touch on Deone Walker really quick, because this is somebody from Kentucky, junior, insane measurables, like you mentioned, 99th percentile in height at 6'7" and a fourth, 97th percentile in weight at 340 pounds, 93rd percentile in hand size at 10 inches and 10 and 3/4 inches, and then 34 and 5/8 inch arms, which is 90th percentile. So all of his measurables are above the 90th percentile for a defensive tackle, and yet here we have him both at number 15. So talk to me about what you saw with Deone Walker, and I'll either echo or bring my own perspective to some of that.
Well, what you love about him when you just write things down and look at him is that he is built like a nose tackle. The problem with him is that his tape and ability doesn't translate to what makes a good nose tackle. That was my biggest issue with Deone Walker. I felt like he wants to play more like a 3-tech quite often. Mm-hmm. And number one, this is not this extreme, but I think he's the Ollie Gordon of the defensive prospects, where the 2023 tape is just better. And I went into this season expecting Ollie Gordon to potentially be a top 5 running back. Right. And I went into this season for Deone Walker to establish himself as a top 10 pick. And it's just not, the tape is not the same. He plays high all the time. The pad level is just always high. And I get he's 6'7". Like, that's part of the deal here, but you have to be able to control that. I remember we had this combo a lot when Joe Tippmann was a center prospect, because there just aren't a lot of centers that are 6'6". And you look at it and you're like, well, is he able to control the pad level? And to Tippmann's credit, he was. He just found a way to do it. I haven't seen that from Walker yet, where leverage is a serious problem. I mean, it's a really serious problem where we were borderline laughing at times at the Senior Bowl when Willie Lampkin, who's 270 pounds, would get under Walker's pads and stop him in his tracks.
Yeah, so he's given up like 70 pounds there and like handling Deone Walker.
He gets stuck on blocks. Like when teams run zone against Kentucky, he just gets stuck on blocks and can't diagnose the play. I don't see a pass rush plan. I don't see refined hands. Mm-hmm. The run stop grade and run stop percentage was both below 50th percentile. Like, listen, this guy I thought was on a promising trajectory from 2023. It's not over. He can find that again. There's examples of him having this wrecking ball power on the interior. He's got all the natural tools, but it just hasn't translated, Trevor. It hasn't translated where he got better this year, and I didn't think he did. When you watch that Senior Bowl group, I thought he was, one of the more underwhelming guys out of such a standout group. It's just he's going to be drafted on being a ball of clay and a coach thinking they can unlock something in him that we didn't see at Kentucky this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that when you look at a player like Deone Walker, the alluring part is you go like, wow, okay, you're more than just a nose tackle, but he's almost fast forwarding to the like more than part.
Right.
And we still need you to be a nose tackle, right? Like the whole reason why you would be a top 10 pick or you were regarded as one of the best interior defensive linemen in this class is because we would want you to be an absolute boulder first and foremost, anywhere from a 0 technique to a 3 technique position. And he's not. You mentioned that the pad level and the leverage is a major issue. And then he'll try to sort of like, another thing is, hey, he's 340 pounds, but he's kind of got skinny ankles, skinny calves. Like his build is very different. And so when that's the case,
he's top heavy. You could say
he's top heavy. Yeah. And so again, he tries to win fully standing up because he's not really winning with power in the lower half. He's like, all right, well, that's not really how I win anyway. So he just tries to stand straight up and almost like UFC fight or like box you, right? That's how he's trying to get by you. And it just doesn't really fly as much at the NFL level. And again, like 270-pound Willie Lampkin showed you that, hey, when guys play with better technique and they get under your pads, which unfortunately for Walker is too easy, then you become less of an impact player at that point, even with some rare measurables to you. So we sort of see him the same, somebody who I think he's still going to be a mid-round pick, like a third-round pick, fourth-round pick, something like that. I don't think he's going to go higher than that. I don't think he's going to be a second-round pick. I have a fourth-round grade on him. I'll try to be a little bit better about that. I know some of you guys have sort of wanted some context there. So I have early grades that I do on a lot of these final scouting reports, so I'll try to shout him out whenever I can. But that was sort of my grade with him. I think he's a fourth-round type of player, even with the measurables kind of baked into it. What about Jordan Phillips and Omarr Norman-Lott? Both of us had them at 13 and 12, respectively. I guess I'll start with Jordan Phillips from Maryland, who extremely powerful player. And when you watch him for a nose tackle, like this is somebody that you want playing the nose tackle position. What I was talking about with Deone Walker, how we need you to be a nose tackle first and you need to defend the run first. That is what Jordan Phillips does. He understands the assignment every single time he goes to line up. I mean, he is very low in his stance. The feet are very wide. When he is in a 4-point stance, he is probably the lowest defensive lineman on the field. So when you talk about like neutralizing a tush push or a fourth and short, third and short situation, like put Jordan Phillips in the middle and he'll be able to do it. He is a former weightlifter and wrestler from his high school days. He was number 51 on Bruce Feldman's college football freaks list. He has squatted 665 pounds, power cleaned 365, and he's done an overhead press of 365 for 2 reps. Just an absolute monster there. Now, talked a little bit earlier about somebody being sawed off. I think you were mentioning Jamaree Caldwell as that. That is Jordan Phillips as well. Just 6'1" and a fourth, 16th percentile. The weight, 318 pounds. You love that at 81st percentile. But then hand size, 15th percentile. Arm length, 32 and a fourth, 19th percentile. Connor, the reason I see a lot of love out there for Jordan Phillips, and I think he's a good player. Obviously categorized him as a nose tackle here. So somebody who's also incredibly young. He was only in the 2022 recruiting class, spent 1 year at Tennessee, transferred over to Maryland, where he's been a starter over the last 2 years. He doesn't have a pass rusher's mentality, and he doesn't have the length to be a pass rusher. So to me, depending on what you really might need from your team, he's again like a third or fourth round pick, in my opinion, depending on how much you prioritize that. But I just don't think you're really ever going to get much of a pass rush out of Jordan Phillips. If you do, fantastic football player. If you go, he's one of the youngest players in this class. You trust some explosiveness, some of the hand usage that we have seen from him. You already love the run defense and what he could be as a run defender. But he ain't getting any longer, right? He's not getting any taller. Like those things are going to stay the same, and those are going to be a constant there. And I saw a good football player, but I saw a football player who's, I feel like ceiling I already see right now, because I don't exactly think that he is going to bud into this great pass rusher. So that's why I had him at 13. What about you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, my synopsis after the strengths and weaknesses just kind of jump ahead. I wrote Phillips is a dense nose tackle with mass and power, but loaded with inconsistent tape. He's still figuring out a pass rush plan, but could be a beefy rundown contributor in a limited snap count early on.
Yeah.
He's somebody to me that has nose tackle experience, which not all these guys get. He's got mass. You brought up the background, how strong of a guy he is. He's got that lower body density where you're like this. It's an oak tree. Like he's got an oak tree for ass.
This dude's
legs.
Calves are my thighs.
Oh yeah. It's that, it's like the Tavondre Sweat look where you're just like, oh my God, you can carry around 8 people on those legs. So that that's what a nose tackle looks like. And there's times where even he could blow up the run with force because of that, but he also has a savvy arm over against the run that he does not utilize as a pass rusher. Like there's times where I'm like, oh man, he flew into he's slow off the ball. Let me make that clear. He'll see it's a run play and it'll be like, okay, arm over into the backfield for a big play. But as a pass rusher, like he didn't have a sack these 2 seasons, like for Maryland. As a pass rusher, it just felt like everything was slow and reactive rather than proactive. It's like
he does right now. He does not have the mentality.
No, it's I don't want to make a mistake. I want to make sure they're not in run mode. I'm going to get off the ball and read everything. Oh, it's a deep drop. Well, now I'm kind of just going to force my way forward and see what happens. So, but now let me be clear. Like, Jordan Phillips is both in our top 15s in a loaded class because he has an NFL role right away. You could stick him right at nose or shade nose and say, hey, man, can you two gap for me?
Yeah.
Like, can you just hold the point of attack here and stop the run? And that's why teams will ultimately like him. And I saw him exactly the way you did.
I see him as a rotational player at the next level, but one who you're very comfortable with the rotation that he's going to have. Now, if some people want to say to me like, hey, he is one of the younger players in this class. Maryland was just asking him to be a run defender. That pass rush mentality and mindset is going to come. I go, okay,
maybe, yeah.
You can draft him higher than me. That's fine. But I feel like the longer I do this, the less I am willing to be like, oh, we didn't see this at all in college. Yeah, you're going to get that at the NFL level. It's so much more rare than we think it is with these players. So for Phillips, I wanted to see a little bit more of it. And honestly,
that's why I liked Caldwell better. Like, I thought Caldwell could do all the run defense things Phillips could do, but once in a while he'll hit a pass rush move that you're like, hey, maybe. Like, I've seen it a couple times.
Yeah. And so I had Jordan Phillips as at number 4 on my nose tackle rankings. And then the guy who I had number 8 on my 3 technique rankings is Omarr Norman-Lott, who I had one spot ahead of him. And you talk about guys who are sort of built similarly. I mean, Omarr Norman-Lott, 6'2", so he's a little bit taller than Jordan Phillips, 295, so he's a little bit less in weight, but he makes up for that too. By the way, did you see Omarr Norman-Lott's hand size measurements?
Yeah, over 11.
11 and 1/8.
Yeah.
I think that
meat hooks.
Would that be the most at the combine?
No, you'd be surprised. But it's up there.
Where's hand size? Let me see. Just overall hand size. What do we got? Cool. No, it wouldn't be the most.
Yeah.
We got some freaks, but it would be on the first page of Mock Draftable.
That says a lot. Big hands.
JJ Watt sized hands, by the way, 11 and 1/8. That's JJ Watt.
There you go. So there's his player pro comp.
Lord. Yeah, Omarr Norman-Lott, future 3-time defensive player of the year, very casual. And Omarr Norman-Lott has much longer arms than Jordan Phillips. Now, he's not quite the run defender that Jordan Phillips is. He didn't quite have that strength, but he's got a lot more pass rush chops. He is a much better pass rusher. He brings so much to the table in that regard. This is somebody who I have been a big fan of for a long time. I feel like really since, I can't remember if this was summer scouting or just in the middle of the season. I remember us doing an episode and I was like, why are we talking about this guy? Why is nobody talking about Omarr Norman-Lott? And obviously gets to go to the Senior Bowl, but he gets hurt on day 1, which is kind of a bummer there. He was at Arizona State for, I believe, 3 seasons. Yeah, and including a redshirt season, right, before he went to Tennessee. And I think people might look at him and be like, okay, well, what's up with the lack of production here from him? If you like this player so much, if he's really explosive, if he's got good speed to power, if he's got great leverage, if the hands come up fast and violent, if he's got pass rush moves, if he has a 97th percentile pass rush win percentage, what's the deal? Where's the production from him? Well, Tennessee does that thing where they just sub in 3 different hockey lines on the defensive line all the time. So this is a player who I do think can be a better pro than in college. And I promise you, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite there. It's different, though, because I've seen it with Omarr Norman-Lott. I'm not like hoping someday we see it. I've already seen it from him. He just didn't get a ton of playing time, or I think as much playing time as he deserved because of how deep Tennessee's rotation was. So this is a player who, I always gravitate towards these types of 3 technique defensive tackles. Explosive, naturally low pad leverage, whether he's in a 3-point or a 4-point stance. Very impressive upper body strength to sometimes bench press offensive linemen back, even if he loses leverage and pops up pretty quickly. I think he can hold up decently well against double teams. He's got those massive hands to him. I'd love to see him be a little bit more of a finisher when it comes to his pass rush moves. Sometimes I'll see like a rip move in there, but it won't be, it's not coming through. It's not like totally violent with him ripping the arm up and getting clean and getting free. If he does that, I think that he's going to have even more backfield production. And I think that we could talk about him potentially like a guy who I have a little bit higher on these rankings, which we'll get to in a guy like TJ Sanders. But because how Sanders was much more efficient getting into the backfield clean, I have him ranked a little bit higher than I do a guy like Omarr Norman-Lott, who I still like quite a bit. Did you see him the same way, or what were the things that you wanted to see for him?
I did. We were joking at the first day of Senior Bowl practice when we saw him out there. This will be the most football he's played all year. It's just like, I mean, seriously, Trev, he had 84 snaps against the run this year. 84. Some guys get that in 2 games.
I know. Truly.
So I love all the things you do about him as a pass rusher. I do think the run defense is far from NFL ready. I just saw him on the ground a lot against, the Georgias and the Floridas of the world.
Mm-hmm.
When teams double him, it's like he doesn't stand a chance out there.
Man, I saw a couple of reps though, where he'd get down in like a corkscrew technique where he would put his hands out and he would drop that knee and he would hold the line of scrimmage. And that gives me hope. I agree with you.
There's definitely
inconsistent, but I have hope. I have hope here.
That's fair. There were games this year where he was totally fine against the run. And then there was a handful where I was like, oh man, they're going at him. And once again, you're dealing with an 84 snap run sample size. And the year before it was 82. Like he hasn't done it.
Hey, it's going up. 86 next year.
Yeah. Here we go. It actually might be the case. Oh man. So yeah, the run defense to me, it's got a little ways to go, but you're talking about somebody that just when you let him pin his ears back and go, man, he just gets off the ball. He's got twitch. He once again active hands. I think
twitch.
He plays so low. So he rushes so low underneath people to try to swivel through gaps, shoot gaps, get under pads. I mean, it's like the total inverse of what we just talked about with Jordan Phillips, in my opinion, in terms of what they're good at. Like Jordan Phillips, can you kind of like drop your hips and just hold the point of attack and form a wall? Omarr Norman-Lott, it's 3rd 12. Get your ass out there and just get off the ball and go and disrupt the game, big fella. And he could do it. He made the most of his pass rush opportunities this year.
Again, good defensive line coach at the NFL level, and I think there's a world we're talking about him like we're going to talk about TJ Sanders. Because to me, I think that these guys are built somewhat similarly. I'd even tell you that Omarr even has like a little bit more twitch to him than TJ is. But TJ is just he is a smoother, more high IQ, just always in the backfield type of a player as a pass rushing 3 technique. So, but we'll talk about Sanders in a little bit. So I have one more guy here on the top 15 because I had Deone Walker at 15, Elijah Roberts at 14, Jordan Phillips at 13, Omarr Norman-Lott at 12, and then I had Alfred Collins from Texas at number 11. I have a feeling he's probably going to be in your next 5.
Yeah,
and Joshua Farmer, to me, is in my next 5 as well. So, all right, so you have him at 8. Let's talk about Collins first, and then I've got Farmer at 10, so then we can revisit that because I think that's pretty close. You've got Alfred Collins at number 8 here, the defensive tackle now from Texas. He wasn't always a defensive tackle, but let's talk about him really quick. What'd you like about him with having him in your top 10 there?
Yeah, I mean, he's played 64 games over the past 5 seasons for Texas. So this guy has played a lot of football. And to me, he's just a stout, run-defending defensive lineman that can play both 3 tech and 5 tech and has the mass to do so. He knocked down 6 passes in 2024. The awareness from him, I thought, was really, really good. Like, he just understands what run games are trying to do to him. He understands when to get his hands up and knock the ball down. He played over 100 snaps at nose tackle in 2024. So I know I said at the top I like him at 5 tech and 3 tech, but just the fact that he was able to give Texas some nose tackle snaps this year.
I have him ranked as a nose tackle.
You do? Okay. That's interesting.
Would you have him more as a 3?
I mean, that's kind of the beauty of him and why I have him high. I think he could play all 3 spots, which is, okay. I don't feel that way about a lot of guys in this class. I think that's fair. Like 5 seasons to tape at Texas, and they were confident enough in this guy to play any role, and he never really looked out of place. So I will be fully transparent. Collins, to me, is a floor player. Like, I have players behind him, like Shemar Turner, Jamaree Caldwell, Norman-Lott, without a doubt, that have way higher ceilings than him. But it's just what you see is what you get with Alfred Collins. I'm good with that. He could play on my defensive line. I could trust him against the run. I don't think he is really creative as a pass rusher, and I think he
Mhm.
does need to watch his pad level a little bit. There was times as a pass rusher that his
Totally.
pads got a little high,
Yep.
but he is like my steady Eddie in this group. I had him at 8, which is kind of crazy that there are 7 better defensive linemen in my eyes against him in this class. But he did a lot of dirty work for Texas, and he just does a lot of things the right way. He plays smart, responsible, read and react, stack and shed football.
So I have him as my third ranked nose tackle. So just above Jordan Phillips. So this is the next nose tackle that I had here. And I had him at number 11, just out of my top 10. Really interesting background to him. 5-star defensive end coming out of Bastrop, Texas. Now, obviously, he's playing more defensive tackle. He's been a pretty consistent contributor for this Texas team. Although he hasn't really been like a full-time starter the whole time, he's been pretty consistent. I mean, he played 10 games as a true freshman with 1 start, 12 games with 4 starts the next year, 12 games with 1 start the next year, 14 games with 6 starts the next year, and then he was a much more regular starter this past season in 2024. So he has been all over the place there. He played basketball. He ran track in high school. He also participated in the shot put and the discus while he was playing track as well. He was a high school All-American. So the 5-star label sort of goes into what kind of an all-around athlete this guy was at the high school level. And so you talking about how versatile he is. I agree with you, man. I mean, he's built super well. He dropped out of the Senior Bowl, so we didn't get those official measurements from him yet. We will at the combine, but Texas lists him at 6'5", 315 pounds, which would be 89th percentile and 76th percentile for an interior defensive lineman and interior defensive tackle to be specific there. He could play nose. He could play 3 technique for you. He could play as a 3-4 defensive end because I think he's got that length. The issue with him, I agree. I think we see this player pretty similarly because I would agree with you as well. I think he is a floor type of a player. I think some people out there who I've seen some interior defensive line rankings for, I think are getting a little bit carried away with why he hasn't been a regular starter for them. Now, I understand he played behind Byron Murphy II and T'Vondre Sweat, but specifically like Byron Murphy II, that dude was a redshirt sophomore. Like
Right.
the pecking order that it should have been was Collins starting over him, but he didn't. Why? Because Murphy's more twitchy, because Murphy's more athletic. Now, that doesn't
Without a
mean to
doubt.
say that Collins isn't somebody that can also be an NFL player. But to me, that's the conversation that we have to have about him because I think he's great against the run. I think he's got great length to him. I think he can handle double teams pretty well. But I don't know if the pass rush is ever going to be there for him because the critique I have of him as a pass rusher isn't necessarily that he doesn't try moves. It's not necessarily some hand placement things. It's none of that. It's the fact that I think he's kind of slow off the ball.
He's not explosive. Say it. You can
He's
say it.
he is not
You're
explosive.
right.
He plays high, and his pursuit speed is very middling. So to me, those aren't things that get better. Those aren't things
Yep.
that you get to the NFL and, oh, okay, all of a sudden, well, this stuff's going to stand out a lot more. So I think this is a good football player and a future NFLer. But for example, I gave him a 3rd round grade. I think he's like a 3rd round type of a defensive lineman who could be a rotational, perhaps even a spot starter for you as your 2nd defensive tackle or nose tackle if you wanted to, because he's got some unique length for a nose tackle and somebody that can defend the run. I just don't think he is ever going to be a difference-making pass rusher in the league because of more athletic and twitch limitations than things that I think will get better with more pass rush moves or better technique or hand placement or things like that. So that's how I saw him.
Yeah. I think we do see him the same way. It's just kind of how you value, what you're getting versus what you want to try to develop.
Sure. Josh Farmer from Florida State. I've got him at 10. You had him at 14, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so I evaluated him as a 3-tech defensive tackle.
Yep, that checks out.
I have him at number 7. He's my number 7th ranked 3 technique in this class. 6'2" and 7/8, so almost 6'3". It's right around 37th percentile for the position. 74th percentile in weight at 314. Another dude with big hands, 10.5-inch hands, 84th percentile, and then specifically, very long arms for a defensive tackle. 35 and a 1/4 inch arm length for Joshua Farmer. That is 97th percentile there from him. 3-star defensive lineman from Florida. committed to Florida State, weighed just 250 pounds when he was a defensive line recruit. I think that his journey goes just as much into his scouting report as his most recent year of tape does, because he came into Florida State as a 250 pound, like sort of defensive line recruit, more of a defensive end, ended up gaining a little bit of weight over the next couple of years in a good way, like getting super strong, great strength and conditioning, being very disciplined there. And Florida State's coaching staff was like, no. Just wait until you see this guy play at defensive tackle where we actually think he's going to be best. Then he got up to all the way above 300 plus. Now he's sitting around 315. And to me, he's a beast. He's been a starter at Florida State over the last couple of seasons. He has been he has been a bright point of that team. Certainly this past year. I mean, he was one of the few stars that they had on that team that was able to shine.
Without a doubt.
I think that he has got a ton of power, man. This is a guy who's got a lot of potential to him. The numbers don't necessarily showcase what I think he could be at the NFL level. You look at the pass rush grade, it's only 75.6 pass rush grade, 77.0 against true pass sets, 8.7 win percentage, that's 59th percentile. Run defense grade, just 53.0 overall grade. But to me, there's just so much potential in the body density he has, the explosiveness, the pop he creates at contact, the arm length that he has to be a unique matchup against guards and centers. Like, all of that is there for him. So he, to me, feels like that ball of clay. Like, that feels like a ball of clay that I want to invest in. Now, he's not quite there, and so you never know how far of a next step he's going to take into the NFL level, because it don't get much easier, or don't get any easier, to progress once you get to the pros. But I do think that could be in the cards for Farmer, who I think has a great background of kind of coming from that defensive end spot to now being a pretty athletic and powerful interior defensive lineman. What'd you see?
Yeah, man, to sum up your points, rugged, right? He plays a rugged brand of football. It's, he will get off the ball and just doesn't care if he gets popped by a chipper, a double team, a slide protection. Like, he plays through anything. Contact wise, he has an NFL body. That's what really jumps out when you turn on the tape with him. He's about 6'3", like you said, really, really long arms, well built head to toe. It's a very well-rounded build, in my opinion. I like the way he gets off the ball and finds his way to attack gaps and get into the backfield in the pocket. And something that you really notice the more and more you watch Farmer this season on a bad football team. Other teams knew he was one of the good players, and he got treated that way. And
yeah, he did.
You watch him, and you're like, man, what is it going to be like when you are viewed as the lowest threat on your team? Because your whole life this year was just getting game planned around. Double teams, pullers. Like, he just got the shit kicked out of him, and not in a way where he's losing, but in a way where you feel like you just fought for 12 rounds, like a boxing fight that goes the distance. That's what I noticed. And I give him a lot of credit because he never mailed it in. Not even close. He plays just as hard every single week. He's the same exact guy. Not much help around him, doing everything he can to stop the run. I wrote down a better scheme, team, and better usage of his length could actually make him an above average run defender at the NFL level. Like, that's the kind of ceiling I saw for this guy. 9.4% pass rush win rate. A lot of power and effort right now, but there is something there to develop, I think. And the one thing I will say why I had him a little lower is I think he's a little tight throughout his body. Like, I don't think he's a flexible, agile kind of player. I think he does a good job getting off the ball and finding his way into how to attack gaps. But I think after that, pursuit becomes a little harder at times. But my synopsis was, Farmer has the body and strength to mold into an early down run stopping defender with the ability to play both 5-tech and 3-tech.
I was very surprised at not just the low run defense grade that he had, but also just watching it on film. Like, he way too easily gets walled off and sort of like pushed off his spot. And you watch other reps and you go, why? Like, you're not that's again why I have hope in this player and why he's higher. I mean, that might be the case.
I really felt that way. Like, I'd watch a game of his and be like, I mean, what else are they going to do? They don't have anyone else.
That might be the case. I just, whether it's anticipation or something, there were offensive linemen where on a pass rush play, he'd overpower the crap out of him and be like,
Yeah.
you are stronger than this player. And then that same guy would wall him off on a run play or, push him out of the gap too easily. And I just think there's some more anticipation there from him. We could have a really damn good player on our hands. I mean, he's got tragic beginnings as well. Lost both of his parents before the age of 11. Ended up being, he was raised by his grandmother when he was growing up, but just a story of absolute perseverance from him to sort of get to this point. And it's just been, it's been cool to watch him over the last couple of years, because you go back and you watch the 2023 tape as well, just his improvement as a player to getting to the point where he is regarded as the pro that he is. And so somebody that you're rooting for, the fact that they've made it here, given how their life went when they were younger, just pretty incredible from him. So you can tell he's got that tireless workers mentality when he is out there, and it's a player along the defensive line that you're going to bet on when they give you that type of effort and that type of mentality. So yeah, I had Farmer as my 7th ranked 3 technique defensive tackle. And I had him as the 10th ranked player overall here on the interior defensive line. Before we get into our top 10s, got a question for everybody out there. You got kids, what's your child's success look like to you, right? Maybe it's a job, owning a home. Maybe it's just being happy, comfortable, whatever that looks like. You can help your kids along that journey and make it easier for them to achieve that with the Kids Investment Account from Fabric by Gerber Life. By making a contribution to your child's future today, you can help give them the means to pursue those dreams, both big and small, whatever they are. Fabric by Gerber Life, it was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the Kids Investment Account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Your kids can't invest while they're minors, but you can help them out still. A Kids Investment Account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investments more time to grow. Whole thing's online, very easy to set up. Could take as little as just 5 minutes, and then you can just manage the account right from your phone. Starts with just $20 contribution right there. No contribution limits, tax advantages, and funds are SIPC insured up to $500,000. No commission fee, low flat monthly maintenance fee. That's it. Funds can be used for anything when they're kids, music classes, sports teams, whatever it is. And then when they're older, maybe it's a first car, first house, starting a new job, whatever that is. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/stock exchange. That's meetfabric.com/stock exchange, MEET fabric.com/stock exchange. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. All right, your 10 through 6. 10 through 6 here in the interior defensive line episode. What do we got?
My 10 through 6. Darius Alexander from Toledo at 10. Number 9, Shemar Turner from Texas A&M. 8, Alfred Collins from Texas. We already talked about him. Of course, number 7, everybody's favorite, Bull Rush McIntyre.
Let's go, baby!
For those that missed the episode, that is TJ Sanders from South Carolina. Man, what a year for TJ Sanders, number 7. And then number 6, Derrick Harmon from Oregon. Another Oregon defensive tackle on this list.
All right. Okay. Man, two Oregon defensive tackles. I know Michigan, had the better defensive tackle duo, but Oregon well represented here for us. Man, where do we want to start here? Who's 10 for you? Who's 10 again?
Darius Alexander.
All right, let's start with Darius Alexander. So you got him at number 10. I got him at number 5.
Hello.
I got him cracking the top 5 from Toledo. Darius Alexander. I have him as my 4th ranked 3 technique defensive tackle. I mentioned he's from Toledo. He's a 6th-year player. Get a job, right? Redshirt senior.
Just like the rest of us.
He's working on
Go
it.
out into the working world.
Great measurable, 61st percentile in height, just under 6'4", 305 pounds, right around 50th percentile for a defensive tackle. Big hands, 76th percentile hands, over 10-inch hands, and then 34-inch arms, 78th percentile there from him. When you look at his background, 2-star defensive end from Fort Wayne, Indiana, very under-recruited. Played football, basketball, also participated in track when he was in high school, but still Toledo is where he could get a scholarship. So that's where he went. He redshirted his first year, played in just 6 games in the second. Only got 3 starts in 2021, 1 start in 2022, but then 11 starts in 2023. And then he was a monster in 2024, one of the highest graded players that we had in PFF, an elite overall defensive grade. Now, he will be older We don't have confirmed dates for all of these guys yet when it comes to birthdays. I know you guys kind of shout that out. You're like, all right, we'll say the birthday. We don't know exactly what those are confirmed, but I do know that Darius Alexander will be 25 years old his rookie season. His birthday is in August, and he will be 25 years old. So you have to think about that. As a 6th-year player, he will be one of the older prospects in this class. But
he's older than Sam Darnold.
He's older than Matt Stafford. You remember the Matt Stafford ones?
Yes. Or people were, there's always one that everybody does.
Yeah.
Stafford,
for a long time it was Stafford. And
then Darnold took the crown. Who's going to be the next one?
Who's the crazy one? I want to hear from the people in the chat. Who's the crazy one that you hear where it's like, this player is still younger than this player?
Well,
what's the reference?
This isn't I can't think of that. I know what you're talking about, but when the Bills took the linebacker they took that signed with the Bears, God, this is going to drive me nuts. Got paid a lot of money by the Bears.
Tremaine Edmonds.
Tremaine Edmonds was I mean, I think he had just turned 20. Like he was one of the youngest prospects. He's one of the youngest prospects I ever remember. Tremaine Edmonds is still 26. It feels like he's been in the NFL for 14 years. He's 26.
That's actually nuts.
Is that not insane?
Wow.
He was drafted in 2018.
And he's 26.
Yes. His birthday is May 2nd, 1998.
That's crazy.
Absolutely insane.
That's pretty much as young as it gets for you getting drafted in the NFL.
Yeah. Where you got to wait like 2 years to have a drink. Your teammates are going out after a win and you got to like
water with lemon.
It's not, you can't even get into the club.
Water with lemon outside.
Unbelievable. He's like, I was a first round pick.
Hey, sitting on the patio getting naps, you know.
Yep. There's worse living.
Exactly.
Anyways,
little crab rangoon. Everybody else, wasting their life away in there. He's got a belly full of rangoon. Sounds like a good deal to me.
They're drinking toxins, and you're getting beefy on crab ragu.
Crab rangoon. I'm gonna throw in a Tremaine Edmonds crab rangoon reference when we cover the league next year. You better believe it. So, anyways, getting back to Mr. Crab Rangoon himself, Darius Alexander. So again, he's 25. Now, getting back to sort of what I was saying before we went on that epic rant. When you are an older prospect, I think some people have a tendency to go, he's a bum, never drafted.
They really do.
And
it's screwed up.
You got to understand, the reason why we look at age is because contracts obviously come into it. For Tremaine Edmonds, for example, what's he on? Like his second, third contract, and he's 26. Obviously, that is valuable because if you're signing your second contract at a younger age, you can expect to get a higher return on them because they haven't, quite literally aged yet. Right. So that sort of goes into it. Breakout age also goes into it when you were in college. If you as a 18, 19-year-old underclassman are able to not only keep up with, but also best generally, 21, 22, 23-year-old college players who have been in the game for 4 or 5 years, then that also matters. That showcases your natural talent. But also, I think the part that people overlook is that when you are younger, it's okay if you are not seen as a finished product yet, because you could tell yourself, oh, the best is yet to come for them. Look at them. They're still just 20. They're still just 21 years old. With Darius Alexander being 25, yeah, it's going to suck because certainly if he gets drafted in the first round, I don't know if he's getting drafted in the first round, but let's say he gets drafted in the first round. After your 5th-year option, you're going to be 30 the next time you sign that deal. So that part of it's not ideal, but in terms of his rookie contract, he is a finished product. He is exactly what you would want him to be. He was elite last year at Toledo. He was a monster at the Senior Bowl. This guy's going to be able to come in and contribute for you right away. And that's important because I just think that people lose track of that. When you are an older prospect, it's not a kiss of death. It doesn't mean you're a bum and that you shouldn't get drafted. It only really hurts you if you're a 24, 25-year-old. And I have to say, well, you got to get better at this. They got to get better at this, because then you start talking about 1 year, 2 year into your NFL career and you're not as productive as what you need to be. Then you're sitting here and you're 25, 26, 27 before you really hit that. Darius Alexander is going to be 25 his rookie season, but this dude's going to hit the ground running. This guy already knows how to play as a pro. We saw it this year at Toledo. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. Dominant football player. So I wanted to sort of go on that mini little age rant. I knew we would when we would get to Alexander, but it's not a total you shouldn't draft this guy if he's an older player. First round, okay, yeah, you can obviously go into that conversation because you want your first round investments to hopefully go 2 contracts for you. If you go 2 contracts with Darius Alexander, he's going to be 33, 34. I understand all that. But how many NFL players make it to the second contract anyways? It's less of a guarantee than we believe. Just draft good football players. Basically what I'm trying to say. Alexander's great. Okay, not only does he have great size, great production, 82.1 pass rush grade, on true pass sets over the last 2 years, 96th percentile pass rush win percentage as an interior player, 88.9 run defense grade. So you love that as well. Explosive first step, great speed to power, powerful leg drive, great build to him for an interior defensive lineman, violent club move. Now that is something that I love. Some of these guys, they'll throw these pass rush moves at you. They'll try to be quick. They'll try to be finesse. Darius Alexander, he acts like you are a tackling dummy. You know, when we're going through defensive line drills, he is just, boom, he is looking to just saw straight through you before he hits you with that arm over and he gets into the backfield. Strong as an ox versus run defense. To me, I just love this player, man. It's why he's number 5 for me on this interior defensive line group, because I think you can plop him into the NFL right now, 3 technique defensive tackle, and he can be a stud for you.
There's an argument to be made. Nobody did more for themselves on the defensive side of the ball than Darius Alexander at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah.
Like obviously Gray Zabel comes to mind overall, a couple other guys, but Alexander goes into a group where he's entirely overlooked and he dominated. And the thing that I'm trying to figure out, Trevor, number one, he's been very productive across, 5 different seasons at Toledo. He's knocked down 6 passes the last 2 years, 14 tackles for loss in that same span. You brought up the pop in the hands. That was the number one thing I wrote down. Like, you either got that or you don't. People do forget you are trying to inflict pain on the guy across from you to disrupt the play. And I think that was the number one thing with Jared Verse. Whenever I watched Jared Verse, I was like, Jared Verse gets, like, when the ball is snapped, Jared Verse treats it like he just came out of the corner of a boxing ring.
Yep.
And wants to go knock out the person in front of him. He treats like the guy in front of him like that on every single play. Heavyweight fighter hands. I think Darius Alexander has really good pop in his hands. Really good effort. Snap by snap basis. Like, the effort is always the same. And that's not easy at that size. And I just thought he was one of the best players at the Senior Bowl. It's weird. I thought he was pretty sluggish getting off the ball on tape. And I didn't think that at the Senior Bowl. So you never know how these guys are being coached up in their scheme in terms of when they're supposed to kind of read and react and when they're allowed to fire off the ball and get after it. I don't think he's a bad athlete, but I didn't see the same athlete consistently on tape that I saw on the practice field.
Right, but we saw it at the Senior Bowl. I agree.
I know he can do it.
I didn't get to his final eval until after we were back from Mobile.
Same.
And the first 2 games I watched, I was like, am I watching this in slow-mo? This is not the same player. But then, like, in the midst of doing the scouting report, I went back and I watched the Senior Bowl stuff and I was like, nope, it's there. He did it in Mobile, so he's got it. I know he's got it in the tank. Now, I didn't give him, like, a crazy high first step explosiveness, like film grade, because I have that as one of my categories because I just didn't see it on film, but I certainly saw it at the Senior Bowl, so I give it a little bit of a bump there because I've seen it on the field. So anyways, Darius Alexander.
Yep. Good player. I don't like the reason I didn't have him ultimately in my top 5. I don't think he's the most explosive, flexible, athletic guy in the world, but he's a damn good player. And to your point about the age, Braden Fisk was a 24-year-old on draft night, and a team went up for him in the second round. He had a really good rookie year. So Darius Alexander, I'm not really worried about it either.
This is a player who is at number 5 for me. I am very curious to see how he tests. In Indianapolis.
That's my one. That is a concern for me right now.
Because if he tests well, then you believe a lot of the explosiveness that you saw in Mobile. And if he doesn't test well, then unfortunately you go, okay, limited explosiveness on tape, which matters most, and then limited explosiveness in Indianapolis. You go, all right, well, it's not like I didn't see what I saw in Mobile, but how consistently am I going to get that? So this obviously, as everything, can adjust when we get these final measurements, final explosiveness tests, all that kinds of stuff. But I I love the kind of player that he is, so I got him at number 5.
What was your
Who'd you
10
have?
through 6?
All right, so my 10 through 6, I'll just
Yeah.
read them off. Josh Farmer, who we already talked about
Yep.
there. Jared Ivey from Ole Miss, who I have categorized as a 3-4 defensive end, because in my opinion, that's where he is going to be best at the NFL level. Now, if he gets drafted to a team that is running more of an even front, then he'll probably play defensive end for them. He probably won't shift inside the defensive tackle, but maybe he will, because when I watched Jared Ivey, I liked this player, and I ended up I at first had him at edge,
That's where I'm going to have him for our final edge ranking show.
and I didn't. The final film grade that I have with the sort of weighted traits that I have in the different categories that I had, the number it spit out, I was like, man, I like this player more than that. And then I put him in more of a 3-4 spot, and it allowed, in my opinion, what he does well in his strengths to shine more, and I have a more favorable grade on him. So I go, okay, well, this is where I actually think that you're going to play best at the NFL level. 6'5" and 5'8", so almost 6'6". That's 91st percentile, even for a interior defensive lineman. 283 pounds, but I easily think that he could gain a little bit more weight. 283 pounds for an interior defensive lineman, that's still 83rd percentile. So he can even gain a little bit of weight and get above the 50th percentile there. Smaller hands at 9 1/8, but then long arms, 33 3/4 inch arms. I mean, I love that about him. The reason why I don't have him at edge and I have him as an interior guy is because, one, I think that the long arms are more of a mismatch with him on the interior. I naturally think that strength is how he is going to win most at the NFL level. The speed to power can be superimposing. So again, just going more towards that power profile. I like how he can square up with any interior offensive lineman, and he can hold up decently well against double teams. He's got some pretty quick hands, which you need if you're playing on the inside. And I think more importantly, the reason why I don't have him at edge isn't even just because of what I think that he could do well on the interior. It's that I don't think he has the speed or the bend or the twitch to threaten the outside shoulder as an edge rusher.
Right.
So I don't want to ask him to do that. I'd rather just ask him to do what I think is his most difference-making traits and his most difference-making style, which is more of an interior player there. So he is my number 1 ranked 3-4 at defensive end here, as I have at number 9. So he's my top guy in that category, and somebody who I do really like a lot for an odd front. Like, I guess I know that Arizona just drafted Darius Robinson, but like Darius Robinson and Jared Ivey. Now, I'm not saying the Cardinals should draft him at 16, but I'm saying like those two guys in the same odd front defensive line, that's a nasty,
they need more help up front still, even after that.
Of 3-4 at defensive end. So like that's just an example of somewhere where I can see him going.
So he was what for you?
He was 9 for me. So he was 9, and then Shemar Turner is 8. Tyleik Williams is 7 for me, and then Bull Rush McIntyre, TJ Sanders is number 6.
Okay, we're pretty close here.
We are decently close. Yeah.
Yeah, I had Shemar Turner at 9. I had TJ Sanders at 7. Let's talk about Shemar.
All right.
Because did you find it fascinating to watch him this year where they kicked him in? Like when we watched him over summer, I was like, oh man, like this guy at his size does some pretty unique stuff for an edge rusher, like a real edge rusher.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 6 sacks that year. He had 10.5 tackles for a loss. This year, they kick him inside. He plays a lot more true like defensive tackle, even some nose tackle, and the production dips. The unique movement skills didn't take advantage of as much on a down by down basis. Like he's an above average athlete at defensive tackle. He really is. And I think he's got quickness. I like the change of direction. I think he's more flexible than a lot of these guys considering his size. But man, like that kick inside, the D tackle and nose tackle, the pass rush win rate, Trevor, went from 13.3% to 6.2%. He just felt like a guy that the pad level on the inside kind of got him locked up at times that he didn't know how to counter as well. I felt like when I watched him over summer playing edge last year, he can kind of flip his hips a little bit, or he can kind of angle his way around guys and counter. On the inside, he felt like a guy that looked around and was like, I just don't have as much space to work with. I don't know if I like the phone booth game as much. So a little bit of a tweener for me right now, but I like his DNA. I like the mindset. I like how
Me
he
too.
plays, even without the production. So I believe like he's just going to figure it out. That's kind of why I'm betting on him this high. I think he's just going to figure it out. I think he plays really rugged and hard against the run when he needs to. So I like Turner a lot. I liked him a lot over summer. And I think the position change was a really big ask of this program. I really do. And I think he held his own. I just don't think he was the same disruptor that he was in 2023. But he's got an NFL body and he's got above average athleticism. And with the tape he's put out, like that's why he falls into the top 10 of a loaded D-line class.
You know, if I remember correctly, I didn't love him at edge. I didn't think that he was built like an edge. Now he's productive. He was more productive last year when he was on the edge. But you start stacking things with Shemar Turner and Shemar Stewart and Nick Scorton.
Yeah.
And you look at all three of those guys, and none of them really got into the backfield the way that you thought they could this past year. So at this point, I wonder if that's just a Texas A&M thing.
You got to ask it because
right,
the NFL likes all three of these guys.
All three of these guys, yeah. And Scorton was very underwhelming when it came to backfield production.
He looked too
Turner
heavy.
Was not nearly as efficient. And Shemar Stewart had a sack and a half this past year. So I don't know. It was that's very strange to me. So I like Shemar Turner as a 3-technique defensive tackle.
Yeah,
and
no, I think that's what he has to do at the NFL level. As much as the adjustment wasn't as impactful, he was not a negative player when they kicked him inside. He just had to play differently. And like you just indicated, we like these players individually, like in a vacuum, but you thought that them playing together would be, you know, the sack exchange of college football, and it just didn't happen.
And it just didn't happen. Now, I will say this about Turner. I agree with a lot of sort of what you said there. I think he's got some unique quickness. The hands, man. This dude's got excellent hands. I mean, they are active. They are fast. They are violent. There are very few interior defensive linemen in this class that play as clean. And when I say clean, I don't mean like discipline aspect. I mean like offensive linemen can't latch on. They can't like get in front of you and mirror you and totally neutralize you. There are very few players that play clean more often than Turner because he is a ninja the second the ball gets snapped. His hands are constantly moving. He's 2-hand swipe, 1-hand swipe, the chop, a rip, something. He is making it so you cannot get 2 hands on him and you cannot latch on and control him. So he plays very clean, and I love that about him. He also plays with relentless effort. His effort will never be questioned. I found this quote from Jimbo Fisher when he was still the head coach of Texas A&M, obviously. He said, quote, "There's nobody on our team that loves football more than Shemar. That guy loves to play. He loves to practice. He loves to work out. He loves to do everything associated with football. He plays with the passion and energy in everything. I love everything about what he does, the intensity that he brings. Every play in practice to him is the national championship." That's awesome. You absolutely love that. And I was reading a little bit about his background and kind of his upbringing as well. Read that kind of got in a lot of trouble when he was in elementary school and middle school, and his mom ended up having him go live with her brother, so his uncle, who was a youth football coach. So he sort of got into football, and his uncle sort of really helped him, set an example of what it's like to be a man and, take responsibility for yourselves and sort of like make the most out of the talent you have and who you are as a person. And then his high school coach ended up doing the same as well, kind of took him under his wing and was a role model for him. And really it feels as though ever since that change, he has just been somebody who has been incredibly driven, incredibly focused, and wanting to make the most of all of his opportunities no matter what. So it was really cool to sort of read that story about somebody who is just taking every opportunity that they have in life, whether it's every snap of the game of football or just how you carry yourself. And obviously how Jimbo sort of talks about him as a person and as a player, which I thought was really, really cool. He's also somebody who has played through a lot of injury. You talked about how much you like 2023. I found this out about him. He had 2 surgeries after the 2023 season, one on a torn labrum in his shoulder, and the other one was an undisclosed lower leg injury.
It's ridiculous.
So that dude was playing hurt in 2023, and you were talking about how much you like this tape. So again, can't question the effort. I think that this is a player who could be an even more productive pro than what we saw at A&M this past season. So I do like Turner as well, and that's why I had him number 8.
Yeah, I had him number 9, and I just he's somebody that just grows on me more and more, which is weird to say because I liked him a lot over summer, but I don't know, man. I love hearing all those things, and I just think he has a DNA that really fits the NFL and
Yep.
will translate. And I kind of see him on the right trajectory. And I just wonder what all those Texas A&M guys are going to look like individually next year. I'm much more bullish on their production going forward, despite the year of like that was weird, you know.
It makes me want to, because I remember where did I have Scorton in our edge rush rankings?
I had him 4th, and I thought you did too.
But maybe I had him like 7th.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I had him 7, and it was because I was so disappointed this year. And I might have to go just revisit this with a different mindset and say, nah, man, I'm almost trusting Purdue more than I am the Texas A&M stuff with him. And so, just an interesting thing to go back and look at. So I had Tyleik Williams at 7. He was my next guy there. Where did you have Tyleik?
4th.
Okay, so you've got him 4, so we're not too far apart. I think the big difference with us with Tyleik Williams is going to be just how high you view the run defense attributes and how much you weigh the fact that he's probably not going to give you much as a pass rusher, right?
No, he's not.
I think the same exact conversation that we had with Jordan Phillips is Tyleik Williams. Williams is just better. And I think that he's bigger. He is longer with his arm length. He's got a little bit more quickness, and he's got a little bit more pass rush chops to him. But to me, these are basically a similar player. If you are a team that loves Tyleik Williams, and I think the NFL is going to be higher on Tyleik Williams than I am. It sounds like he'd be like a late first, early second round player. I see him as more of like a late second, early third type of a player. If you can't get him at that point and you're targeting him as a football team and you don't get him, you're basically drafting Jordan Phillips in like the 3rd round or 4th round. Like it's to me like they are the same archetype of player. I just do not see somebody who's going to give you really anything in pass rushing. And anytime that's the case, I'm going to be a little bit lower on you. So I got him at 7, but you talked to me about what you see in Tyleik Williams at number 4 for you.
He's just a 2-gapping wall. Like there's no, when you watch the game against Oregon in the playoff, especially too, like there's just, you have to run away from this guy. You have to alter what your run game wants to do, because if you run at him or near him, he is going to redirect your running back and the play is ruined typically from there on. Strength from his base, like he's got mass top to bottom, but how he just how he kind of unlocks the strength from his mass is different to me. And this is the difference between the guys that you hope can find it and the guys that have it. And Jordan Phillips is a guy that I think teams will hope he can find it, because there's plenty of snaps where you look at him and go, man, you can't move him. And he looks the part, and we know he's strong. We see him in the weight room. But what's up with the snaps where he does get driven out of the play or just moved out of the play? Like, what did he do wrong there? With Tyleik, I don't really see those plays. He's just a force in the middle of the field that if you want to force a team into 3rd and longs, this is the kind of player you have to have on the field on 1st and 2nd down, especially in a league that everybody wants to be able to run the ball or at least set up the run to work play action. I agree with you. If you're hoping that he's going to be some disruptive pass rusher, like to me, he's just a pocket pusher. That's what he is. And he'll play with effort. And if you have guys on the back end that there's a coverage sack opportunity, he'll play through the whistle and try to get that coverage sack opportunity. But man, stack and shed, hard-nosed player. And I see him just wear guys down. Like you watch the 3rd and the 4th quarter, what they looked like going up against Tyleik Williams in the first half, they run out of gas against this guy. He's just bigger, stronger, good hands. I thought teams had to completely alter their game plan when he was on the field in 2024. They just knew the run game had to be a dimension that was away from him. And I value that so much, that presence so much in the NFL level today, where maybe a 1st-round pick is a little rich because you want a complete-ish player in the 1st round. Although this draft, I don't know. But, man, if you find a way to walk out of round 2 with Tyleik Williams and you just drop him right in the middle of your defensive line, like you feel amazing about that.
He's my number 2 nose tackle that we have here. And
it would be the same for me.
And I think that sort of the way that you're talking about him, if he is that dominant as a run defender, because I thought he was obviously an excellent run defender. He's got really good run defense tape. The run defense numbers for him weren't like elite. They were still very strong for 2 straight years. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him. If it's more of what you say, where he gets to the NFL and he is even a player that, I love the way that you put it there. If you've got a game plan around somebody, it basically doesn't matter what kind of a pass rusher you are. You are making the impact that you need to make. So if he is that level of a run defender for an NFL team, then I think that he would be worthy of a top 50 selection. And so I would totally get it. So that's sort of just where we're at with him. He's somebody who I think this is worth noting. I think Tyleik Williams looked great this year, like physically. And when we talked about him over summer scouting, a little bit of hesitancy that I had with Williams, whose tape I didn't love over the last couple of years. You also have to talk about his journey, about his weight, where he said coming out of high school, he did an interview where he talked about this years later. His senior season in high school got canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So he didn't have a high school football season his senior year. And he said he let himself go. And he was like 365 pounds when he got to Ohio State. So then he cut down to like 320, 325 the next year. And then he cut down even further. And Ohio State had him listed at like 295, which I felt like was a lie anyways. Now, in his 4th year, I think they have him listed at, what's he listed at? 325.
He looks 325.
I think he looked very well built at 325.
Yeah.
Like, I thought he finally was able to shape his body exactly the way that he would want to play on the football field. So it's worth noting that this was the best version of Tyleik Williams that I have had yet. Maybe I'm a little bit lower on him just because it's taken me a little bit of time to get there with him. So I'm kind of wondering, like, am I being a little bit too lower on him? But that's sort of how I see him. I see him as a good football player. I don't see him as a crazy elite football player, but maybe if he is that type of a run defender, you would take him at that spot. So I am at 7. You had him at 4. The next guy that we already talked about Darius Alexander, who I had at 5. You had a 10. I think TJ Sanders is the only guy left in our 10 to 5 or in our 10 to 6.
Yep. I have Derrick Harmon at 6, and I know you have him in the top 5. So
I do. I have him at 4, which I know people are maybe screaming at their computer or screaming at their car radio listening to this, because I've had Derrick Harmon ranked in like the 80s, like the 80s and 90s on the PFF big board for a long time, because I watched him a couple of weeks into the season and I was like, all right, like I kind of feel like it's fool's gold with him. And then I did the full scouting report. Well, he's really good. So
you're allowed to change your mind.
So we'll get to that in a second, but we should talk about TJ Sanders first. I have him at number 6 overall. You have him at number 7, I believe.
I think so. Let me double check that. Yes, 7.
He is my 5th ranked 3 technique defensive tackle here. 6'5", 200 and no, he's actually a little bit less than that.
6'3" and 3/4.
Yeah. So okay, you know what? I got the wrong numbers measured, so I'm gonna look those up and change those. You should talk about TJ Sanders first, and then I'll
6'3" and 3/4, 284, and basically as average arm length as you could have at the position. He is like the true median here at 33 and 5/8. I think that is actually the middle point.
Is that 50th percentile?
I think that might be 50th percentile. So 33 and 5/8. I mean, TJ Sanders, though, as a player who we've talked about a lot, he's had a really good 2-year stretch here in college football for South Carolina. 2023, 4.5 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, 16 hurries, knocked down 4 passes. 2024, you got a little bit more of a reputation. You get treated different. Same year, 4 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, 19 hurries, knocked down 2 passes. He generates such explosive power in the bull rush. That's why I call him Bull Rush McIntyre. And I really like the way he could swipe with his hands. Like, he understands, okay, the guy in front of me knows that what I love to do is unlock lower body power to drive into the chest and knock him back into the quarterback. Now that he knows that, my second move can be the 2-handed swipe to go around him, where he's setting his hands one way for the bull rush, and then I could swipe them out of the way and open up one of the shoulders to try to go around him. So obviously a very calculated player. I think he's twitchy off the ball. I see guards very off balance when trying to do, and that goes back with when you have a reputation for power, it allows you to counter in different ways. So when guards are setting up for power because, oh, it's TJ Sanders in front of me, he's this compact player that can get off the ball and he's very strong for his body weight. Well, now all of a sudden he's kind of stutter stepping and he's got the arms moving. Oh man, I'm in my pass set. I was expecting power. Now I'm kind of in an isolation basketball mode and I lose my balance on my feet. I think he does this is an underrated skill of his. He keeps his head up to understand that quarterbacks are going to escape. And by keeping his head up throughout the rush, there was a couple of times where quarterbacks tried to break from the pocket and he shut them down, that's a skill you have to have in the NFL when you're dealing with Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. It goes like on and on and on. That's a very important skill. Pass rush win rate went up this year. It was 7.2% in 2023, went all the way up to 12.6% this year. That's a really, really big jump for an interior defensive lineman. 94th percentile true pass rush grade, 79th percentile run stop percentage. He's got a ton of experience as a 3-tech. I think you could drop him in as a 3-tech in the NFL and he'll be ready to roll, at least as a rotational player. He just naturally does not have the size to be this space eater or take on double teams. He's 284 pounds. I don't want TJ Sanders to be taking on double teams or having a 2-gap all the time against the run. But if I kind of, limit his role as, hey, I liked him, Trevor, personally, honestly, as an attacking even front player at times, even though I know he's played a lot of 3-tech at college. I looked at him and said, man, if I played an even front and I was a little bit more in attack mode, I would love this guy on my front. We've seen that over the years. Kyle Shanahan always keeps his defense the same, no matter who the defensive coordinator is. Robert Saleh brought that to the Jets. Those kinds of fronts. D'Amico Ryans with the Texans is another one. TJ Sanders, man, those teams, I think, those coordinators, those coaches, those schemes will really, really like this guy.
People who have listened to this podcast for over a year know I'm a big TJ Sanders guy. He was somebody that I brought to the table last year and said, man, if this guy declares, I don't think we're talking about him enough on the interior defensive line group. And then he had another season where he played very well and even bumped up a level. He was a 3-star defensive end coming out of high school, kicks inside. So, defensive end, he was a defensive end coming out of high school, and then he kicked inside a little bit, I think, because South Carolina realized, hey, this guy could be a major mismatch player for us as a 1-gap penetrating 3-technique defensive tackle, like you just put there. I see him very similarly. Not only did he play defensive line and tight end when he was in high school, he also played basketball, averaged a double-double, and was the 6A player of the year in his county playing basketball. And so when you see a lot of those hesitation moves, the 2-handed swipes, the quick stuff to get into the backfield, setting guys up like he's got a basketball in his hand to cross them over, that is where that stuff comes from. And I love when defensive linemen have that basketball type of a background because they're able to do stuff like that. So you mentioned a lot of the stats that he has. I think sometimes he gives up leverage a little sooner than he needs to. Sometimes I think he gets a little overzealous to shoot the gap, and he gets out of his own gap when it comes to run defense, or he can give up contain against mobile quarterbacks. Sometimes I wish that he would get off the block a little bit sooner. There are times when I'm like, I know you got moves. I know you got the hand, and you're letting yourself get locked up. You're exposing your chest a little bit too easy, and these guys are getting able to get their hands inside and to latch on to you a little bit more than they should. But like you said, there are some negatives to his game, but if you are a 4-3 lineup where you let this guy play as a 1-gap penetrating defensive tackle, he's gonna get into the backfield for you, and he's gonna be an impactful pro. So TJ Sanders, Bull Rush McIntyre himself, I'm a big fan of him.
Play style, he's a little taller than this guy, but same kind of length and play style. Sheldon Rankins kind of player to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's like 2 inches taller than Sheldon, which makes that a little tough. But I thought the play style was pretty similar. Just an attacking guy in an even front.
I had Quentin Jefferson written down.
It's Another guy that lived in that scheme. Yes.
Right. So
Yes.
that's who I had written down for Sanders. And just for context, like second round grade on DJ Sanders. I got a second round grade on him for everybody out there. I think that's everybody. So I think we're now getting into the top 5. I mentioned Darius Alexander as my 5. So who's your 5?
You want me to read my top 5 or number 5?
Just read your 5. Let's go one by one now. Let's get this.
Shemar Stewart.
Oh, okay.
Like that's not really as fun because you had him in the edge rankings, but yeah, Shemar Stewart is number 5 for me.
But how did you see him as an interior defensive lineman? Obviously, you got him at number 5. I think I had him at number 5 of edge, ironically enough.
I'm sure he's going to be like the same exact spot on my big board.
So what did you think of Shemar Turner? Sorry, Shemar Stewart. Sorry, I'm going to do that until the end of time. You know how there's a swear jar when you're growing up sometimes?
Yeah.
Like, I need a Shemar Turner, Shemar Stewart jar.
It's going to be hard.
And at the end of the season, we're going to pick a bet. We're going to throw it all in red. And that's literally what's going to finance the yacht because of how many times I'm going to mess these guys.
We finally afford it. Man, and I almost just did it again. I had to stop myself. This is like absolutely ridiculous.
Nah, I'm the bad influence. It's me. I know.
So Shemar Stewart, for some context here, because he really has played a lot of edge and like end over the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But he is the size of a defense. Like he's bigger than TJ Sanders. So my evaluation with him, and I keep going back and forth on this, and I'll be interested to see if he just ends up in my final edge rankings. But I didn't have him in the edge rankings. I wanted him here. He's that classic case of a guy, Trevor, that I think you love, that on early downs, I'll play him on end. I'll play him on the edge. And then when I want my pass rush package to come in, he's playing on the inside because he's going to be extremely disruptive and quick and too athletic for interior offensive linemen. But he obviously has the size and length and movement skills to play as an edge rusher on early downs. That's why teams, like everybody wondering why a guy that had 1.5 sacks in 2023 and 1.5 sacks in 2024 is showing up in the top 20 in mock drafts, because there is some unicorn to this guy. The size, the length, the athleticism for his body type. I think he is just such a confident run defender. Like the way he just shoots into the backfield. I'd like to see him finish some more plays. I've said this before, but he is confident in disrupting the play and getting into the backfield. The change of direction is just silly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I like that he could play inside and outside. Because when you have that kind of change of direction and it's down dependent where I line you up, like that creates a lot of fun matchups, whether it's against a tackle, guard, or center. Obviously, his experience playing everywhere, he's pretty flexible. The bend that he has plays, obviously, if you're playing as an edge rusher, you want to attack the outside shoulder with the bend. But if you kick him inside at times too, like that's going to be problematic, especially on those passing downs where there's maybe a little bit more space. So, and the strides that like to contain quarterback sideline to sideline. When he forces a quarterback out of the pocket, like he can really, really close to the sideline. So he's a weird one, right? Because unlike Turner, his teammate, Shemar Turner, I think the hands are underdeveloped and not as powerful as they should be for what his God-given talent is. Like there's time, and that's where I look at him and go, maybe he's not a defensive tackle, because you need to have really powerful hands to play on the interior of the defensive line. That's where I have a little bit of like a reservation where I'm like, oh man, like you got to have stronger hands on a down by down basis if you're going to play inside. That's why I think it's a hybrid role for him. Mm-hmm. I think there's just a lot of reps where the offensive line is dictating the rush because he doesn't have a lot of moves. He's not a guy with all these different moves. He's just an athlete out there with God-given size, length, athleticism. So you're like, we had this combo earlier where you said, man, I'd like to see it before I just assume it. Mm-hmm. He's 21 on draft day. He's not been really productive, but he does enough that you just go, man, I think with the right coaching and better hand usage and one or two pass rush moves, this guy's going to be a beast. but I still had him at 5 on this with 4 players ahead of him because there is that chance where maybe this is who he is. And he's just a really, really good athlete. He has some splash plays, and he kind of is like he's versatile, which gives him value as well. But is he actually a game wrecker? I don't think he's a game wrecker yet. And that's typically how you want to spend a top 15 pick on a guy you believe can wreck the game. The belief is there because the potential is there, but it still feels like he's got a lot of development left to do.
I think that you paint the picture pretty well of him. I talked about him when we went over the edge rush episode, how a lot of the physical gifts are there, but you're wanting the production to be there for him. And again, I think that some people go, oh, well, it'll come, of course, like it'll show up for him. I am less confident that happens every single year when it comes to these when it comes to these players. It's just, it doesn't happen as much as we wish that it would. That's not to say that it can't happen with Stewart, because you see his athletic gifts in a 73.8 pass rush grade against true pass sets and an 82.0 run defense grade when he's defending the run. But then you also see, okay, great run defense grade, only 4.0 run stop percentage. So solo run stop percentage. That's just 4th percentile. So he's not making plays on the ball.
He doesn't finish plays.
In run
he does
defense.
not.
And then when it comes to pass rush win percentage and getting into the backfield, you mentioned just a sack and a half this past year, just a sack and a half the year before, 13.2% pass rush win percentage. It's 57th percentile. It's not the worst in the world, but he's just not a finisher. He's a great football player. He's a gifted football player, but he's not a finisher. And I think that is worth noting. Just worth noting.
And one last thing I'll say is why I have him at 5 on this list. He rarely ever looks bad on a play. That's what leaves you wanting, like,
sure,
why you believe.
Sure.
Because there are a lot of guys on today's show that they get their ass kicked on plays sometimes, whether it's double team, their pad level's bad, they allow guys to get under them. He doesn't really look bad to me on many plays. It's almost jarring how he could stalemate, but you want the scale to tip a little bit more that he has wrecked the game moments.
So I have Derrick Harmon at number 4.
Yep.
You had him where?
6th.
Okay. So Derrick Harmon, interior defensive lineman, redshirt junior from Oregon, was previously at Michigan State. I'll get to that in a second. I have Derrick Harmon as my number 3 ranked 3-technique defensive tackle in this class. Started his career as a 3-star defensive lineman from Detroit, Michigan, committing to Michigan State. Played both sides of the line in high school, played offensive line and defensive line for all 4 years that he played high school ball. So dude just loved football. Redshirted his first year when he was at Michigan State. Played sort of sparingly in 2022, 5 starts there. In 2023, he started 10 games, primarily a run-stuffing defensive tackle when he was at Michigan State. That was really what his bread and butter was. Then he transfers over to Oregon in 2024, drops some weight, drops about, at least 15 pounds, and boy, did he look quicker. Boy, was he a much better pass rusher at Oregon than he was at Michigan State, and he became a difference-making type of a football player. So he's listed at 6'5", 310 pounds. That would be 89th percentile in height, 65th percentile in overall weight. When you look at some of his numbers over the last 2 years, 90.0 elite pass rush grade against true pass sets, 14.3 pass rush win percentage. That's 97th percentile. And yet the run defense grade stayed pretty strong at an 84.9. That's pretty fantastic stuff from Harmon. Now, I was sort of skeptical about him because going into the season, I watched a lot of his Michigan State stuff and I was like, I don't think he moves well enough to be a pass rusher. And then he dropped the weight and he moved a lot better at Oregon. But in those first couple of weeks when I watched him in the beginning parts of the season, I said, okay, you're lighter, you're a better pass rusher, but now I think you're getting moved off the ball a little bit too easy. And so now at that point, I get worried. When I see you at a heavier weight, you go, okay, you're a run stuffer, but you can't really give me what you need to as a pass rusher. And then throughout the first couple of games of the season, I said, all right, cool, you're a pass rusher. Now you're getting kind of bullied off the ball a little bit. So then there's just this giant give and take. And I feel like I've been burned like this before. These players, they just go back and forth and they fluctuate weight and they can't decide like what they actually want to be at the defensive tackle spot. And I get a little bit worried. As the season played on, Harmon not only continued to get better as a pass rusher, but he also really stabilized who he was as a run defender to now, in my opinion, we've got a complete three-tech defensive tackle. Great arm length for an interior player, really quick first step, quick footwork beyond that, which I love. Some of these guys that we talk about, they got a quick first step. They go, okay, I'm going to get low and I'm going to launch off of my quad muscles because I've got good technique. I'm not having a false step. I'm launching off of that front foot and I'm getting into the backfield. But Harmon's got a great first step, and then he's got quick feet after that to continue to chop the feet, to continue to be able to cross offensive linemen and blockers up. The hands are fast as well, so the hands are as equally as fast as the feet are. To me, the push-pull moves that he has, when he's getting off the line of scrimmage and boom, those hands fire up very quickly. They fire up inside. They're knocking blockers back onto their heels, and then it's like, all right, the second they start to recover, boom, you're yanking them to the left. I think that the left or right, I think Harmon does that very, very well. I think he's a super competitive player. Love the motor that he plays with, especially at a lighter weight. I feel as though he's playing with a much higher motor. He's a little bit naturally higher when it comes to the pad level. He's got a little bit of inflexibility when it comes to truly getting his butt down in his stance when he's in a three-point stance. But this is somebody who I love how fast the hands work. I love how fast the feet work for him. He turned into such a high IQ pass rusher and just overall football player this past season. So to me, that is also something that really stood out. My bottom line, my sort of summary assessment of Harmon, he has just 1 year of notable production, but that one season showcased a player with a high football IQ, consistent competitiveness, and NFL level quickness to be a contributing and potentially impact three technique defensive lineman for an even front. So that is sort of how I got around on Harmon. I see him like a Christian Barmore type of a player. That is who came to mind when I was starting to see the best in the flashes of Derrick Harmon and what he could be at the NFL level, as I have with him a second round grade.
He really grew on me. And just the fact that I had the same kind of pathway as you, where I was like, is this a random breakout? Is there a bit of a fluke here? I mean, he is just so disruptive, man. So disruptive. And the ability to cross the face of the offensive lineman with quickness and swim moves and at that size, but then also bull rush underneath blockers backwards into the pocket. Like, that's the kind of changeup that makes a really effective interior rusher. The things that concern me, he's got a really top heavy build still, even after dropping that weight. And the balance is not great all the time.
He can get knocked over. Yeah.
He gets knocked over. Sometimes he's chasing the running back and he missed 7 tackles against the run in 2024 when he's right there. He just doesn't have that reactive balance. So I want to see the body continue to improve. It's good that it has improved. I think if his body continues to improve, he'll be a big time NFL player.
So that brings us to our top 3, which I sure as hell hope are the same 3, unless we're seeing one of these guys.
I think they are
drastically different. Let's go ahead and just go 3, 2, 1. Who you got, and then we'll talk about all 3 of these guys.
So Kenneth Grant was 3 for me, the nose tackle from Michigan. And man, did I pull my hair out between having him at 2 or 3. At 2 was Walter Nolen from Ole Miss, who what an unbelievable year. I'll just say it right now. I watched him over summer and I was like, this guy, for all the hype as a recruit, has not found it yet. He found it this year, Walter Nolen, and was magnificent. And then number 1's Mason Graham, who I still think is one of the best players in this draft. And I'm a firm believer people are starting to have prospect fatigue on him.
Mr. Meat Fabric himself, is that what we're going with? We're calling Mason Graham Mr. Meat Fabric?
Yeah, Mr. M Fabric.
M Fabric. You know what's funny?
The M's not from Mason.
You know what's funny? You talked about how close it was for you with Walter Nolen and Kenneth Grant. I have Walter Nolen at 3.
I figured. I had a feeling. 2,
and I have Mason Graham at number 1. The difference between Walter Nolen and Kenneth Grant for me in my numerical film breakdown scale is 0.5.
That's amazing.
He
makes me feel better.
I gave Walter Nolen an 80.5, and I gave Kenneth Grant an 81. These numbers are obviously out of 100, and these guys both in that category have late first, early second round grades. So talk to me about Nolen first, somebody who you have at number 2, somebody who you talked about just taking a big time leap this past year, the interior defensive lineman from Ole Miss, and then I'll give you my thoughts here after you.
I admittedly, when I watch a guy the first time and I'm just like, nah, not about it at all. I mean, I didn't even rank him over our summer rankings. I could be, I'm not firm. Like, you need to be very, very pliable and willing to change your opinion in this business, or you will miss all the time. But you know how we build in not even biases. You're just like have these things built into you. Nolen just has completely altered a lot of the concerns that I had. I thought he was somebody that wanted to play a finesse game in the most brutal part of the football field. And this year, I think he just completely rounded out his game. 6.5 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, 25 hurries, knocked down 2 passes. He was the number 1 overall recruit in 2022, if anyone needs to be reminded of that. Started off at Texas A&M, transfers to Ole Miss. He gets off the ball, man. Like, this guy at his size of a defensive tackle, and I want to pull up the exact measurements. So at the Senior Bowl, 6'3 and a quarter, 293, the old median, 33 and 5/8 inch arms.
That's 67th percentile for a defensive tackle, by the way. It's a little better than the median,
Okay.
But that is often like the cutoff for some teams, right? It's like
they
there.
Prefer right there, 33 plus.
Yeah.
This guy flies off the ball. Good first step, plus athleticism at his size. They play him inside. They play him on the edge. I think the stop and start at D tackle, you just don't see a lot. Like, the ability really to take that quick step and then reposition himself, redirect himself, or react. What it allows him to do, Trevor, that not a lot of humans get to do at the position is you can see things wrong and you can correct yourself and actually recover. And I think that is so hard to do in the trenches, because when you're 290 plus pounds, if you see something wrong and you step the wrong way, it's so hard to have that reactive quickness to recover. No one does it. Even when he guesses wrong or sees it wrong, he recovers and makes really big plays. He can angle his body when he's at 3-tech. He has this ability to shoot gaps and kind of twist his body and swivel his hips into the pocket. He's got an arm over, where when he like some of these other guys that get the arm over working against the run game, he flies into the backfield where you could barely get the handoff off. 85th percentile true pass rush win grade in 2024, and only getting better. Like, true trajectory guy for me. I actually thought, people talk about him and Stewart together a lot. I thought Nolen made significant productive jumps this year, where Stewart was marginal, right? It was like, I see some of it. With Nolen, it's just undeniable on the tape. I thought he got a lot better at taking on double teams in 2024. Like, with his build, he's not built like Tyleik Williams and Jordan Phillips and Kenneth Grant, where it's like, I could sink my 330-pound ass and hips and kind of just plant into the ground and try to move me. He's strong.
He's strong as hell up top, though.
Pound for pound strength, man. This guy's got it. He's absolutely got it. Yep. And when running backs try to run away from wherever he's aligned, he's got plus range as well. So I like Walter Nolen a lot. I think he's got to get a little bit more refined technically to work
100%.
off of skilled blockers. Like, the blockers get under his pads, and he's not strong enough always to just discard them. And he's not refined enough to kind of use his hands to get out of it. It's getting better. It got a lot better this year. It's not where it needs to be yet. And I did think this year, you look at the Georgia, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kentucky games, that 4-game stretch, he only had two pressures. He just ran cold as a pass rusher, where he had a lot of other big moments. So Nolen is the actual ball of clay that has produced enough where it's kind of an insult to call him that I would bet on in this class, Trevor, over Stewart.
Milton Williams is the comp that I had for him.
Absolutely love that.
And Williams is obviously
he figured it out.
To cash the hell in.
But it wasn't always like that.
No, right. And it wasn't always like that. And it took him a little bit of time to develop, but we saw the athletic gifts that Milton Williams had when he was coming out of Louisiana Tech. He absolutely blew up. I don't think it was a combine. I actually think it was his pro day, now that I'm thinking about it. But I mean, it just had some insane spider chart numbers. It's one of those things where like the whole thing is green, just the whole spider chart is loaded there and filled out. Walter Nolen can be the same type of player. You mentioned he's not the most polished dude in the world, and because of that, I've got a long list of strengths and weaknesses for him. I'll read them off really quick. Well-built player, incredibly strong, especially with momentum. The raw strength and explosiveness are evident consistently. Has the build to play both defensive end and defensive tackle. I think he's best at 3 technique defensive tackle, sort of right in the middle. Very strong tackler, low missed tackle rates when he gets his arms on you. Good effort throughout the whistle. Okay, those are the strengths. Weaknesses. Looked less out of control in 2024, but still needs to be more purposeful in what he does. Lacks a go-to pass rush move, needs more of a pass rush plan. Pass rushers can stall quickly because he doesn't think to get to those counters. He doesn't have the counters mastered. Exposes chest a little bit too easily. Tries to disengage with just power instead of technique. And I think that you put it, again, perfectly. There are so few players at the NFL level that can win with just athleticism or strength. So very few. And even the ones who are the best, even the guys who you would say are the strongest, the most athletic, the reason why they probably come to your mind quickly is because they're productive players. And that means that they're often just not winning when it comes to their athleticism. So he needs to become a more polished football player. And that's why I see Milton Williams in him, because he is incredibly gifted as a 3 technique defensive tackle, much like Williams is. But it took Williams a little bit of time to get to the elite defensive lineman that we saw this past year and difference maker that we saw in the Super Bowl. So I agree with you, man. We were both on the Walter Nolen, like way outside the early top 5s in summer scouting. He had such a long way to go, but he's a younger player. He's a former number 2 overall recruit. I can't remember exactly where he was in the country. And we're seeing him really start to bud into that. Next guy I have at number 2, you have at number 3, is Kenneth Grant from Michigan. I went on a journey with Kenneth Grant.
Yes, we all did.
I watched 2 games of Kenneth Grant, and I was actually pretty disappointed. I saw a lot of things that I didn't think that I was going to see with him. I saw a lot of inconsistency, and more importantly, I saw a lack of aggression and urgency from him. There were times when I would watch him and I'm like, get up the field. Like, what are we doing? Like, again, sort of going back to the conversation that we had. I can't remember who this was at the beginning of the podcast. Deone Walker. Okay, Deone Walker is where we started to have this conversation where we're like, okay, you're a nose tackle. And I love that you do the extra stuff, but I still need you to be a nose tackle. And there are a couple of times where I was like, dude, like, I need you to be more aggressive here. But then there are other plays where he just puts it all together as a 6'3", 340-pound dude with extremely nimble footwork, very fast hands, the ability to just snap his fingers and like Thanos just hold the line of scrimmage against the Hulk or whoever they have thrown at them. Like, there are plays that Kenneth Grant has that truly lives up to Jim Harbaugh calling both him and Mason Graham, quote, gifts from the football gods, like he called them a couple of years ago when he was still the head coach at Michigan. There are times when I see that from Kenneth Grant, and I want to make it very clear. It's not like I see those very hot and cold from him. It's almost like he's so dominant in some reps. I go, just be that dominant all the time. And I feel like it's almost a mentality as the reason why he's not anything that goes into lack of ability or anything like that, but really good pass rush, 82.5 pass rush grade on true pass sets, 68th percentile on pass rush win percentage. And again, the only reason why I think those numbers are lower than they should be is because sometimes he just doesn't attack with the aggression that I want him to. There are times when he's rushing the passer where he's kind of like dancing around, he's doing his finesse thing, and I'm like, get up the field. Like, you are good enough to do this and go after the ball and just go hunt. And I want him to pin his ears back a little bit more because when he does it, I think that he's fantastic. Really good run defender, really good run defense grades. That inconsistency from he plays with higher leverage. He gives up leverage and he gives up his pad level way easier than he needs to. Again, because I think that he pops out of his stance. And again, he wants to do the finesse thing. And it's like, man, I want you to be power first, and then we'll see some of that finesse. And so the inconsistencies there are sort of why I went on a journey with him, because initially I was like, man, like, I think I'm going to be way lower on this player than I thought I was going to be. And then I watch more games and it's like, okay, I just see so much difference making NFL ability here that I couldn't come away with a surefire first round grade for him, but I did end up with that late first, early second round grade because what he does and the potential that he has, the things that we have already seen, he just does at such a high level at a size that you really love. So that's where I'm at with Kenneth Grant.
Yeah, I saw him the same way. I mean, you want him to be Dexter Lawrence when you see the 342-pound frame.
And he's just not Dexter
No,
Lawrence.
he's not, and nobody is. I think I honestly can make a case he's the best defensive player in the NFL. But
Right.
But you're right. Like, that's the thing. You look at him and you're like, man, you should just be dominating all the time. And ironically, Trevor, I thought his best game this year was against Ohio State, which, the way that program cranks things up for Ohio State, no matter if they're a 4-win team or no matter if they're undefeated. And it's like, I saw you do it in the biggest game of the year. Why don't you always do it? But the size, I mean, another guy, he's knocked down 8 passes over the last 2 seasons. He can hold the point of attack. He's got that sneaky swim move. He's got foot quickness. Yeah, I'm with you. Like Kenneth Grant, the whole, like with Deone Walker, they don't make a lot of guys like this. No, they don't make a lot of Kenneth Grants, and that's why he's going to be a first-round pick.
You know who he reminds me of? You know what comp I have for Kenneth Grant?
Well, it's got to be a small list because there's not a lot of guys his size.
I'm not gonna torch you with the guess.
Okay.
BJ Raji.
It's funny. I'm on Mock Draftable in the weight range, and he's right in front of me right now because he was 337.
And Raji was kind of this, big giant nose tackle who gave you a little extra juice in pass rush.
But you always wanted him to be more stout than he was on a down-by-down basis.
And he was a big difference maker. He was on the Super Bowl teams, right? I mean, like, he was a big difference maker in some huge plays for them when Green Bay needed it most. But like that, I felt good about that comp for Kenneth Grant, BJ Raji there. And then the last guy, Mr. Meat Fabric himself.
Yep, M Fabric.
It's Mason Graham. We have loved Mason Graham for a long time here on this podcast, and this is no different. This is my number 1 ranked 3-technique defensive tackle. He is amongst all of the defensive linemen in this class, who I think that there are a lot that are going to make up NFL rosters, he's the only one who earned that surefire first-round grade from me. 6'3", 318 pounds. He is a sawed-off player. He's got shorter arm length than you want, and I think that sort of goes into the deficiencies that you might see from him, but good Lord, there aren't many. Elite pass rush grade against true pass sets, 90.9, 97th pass rush win percentage at almost 15%, 93.0 run defense grade. And these are all over the last 2 years, by the way. So it is large sample size stuff. And then you talk about making plays in the pass rush game and the run defense game, 12% solo run stop percentage. That's 98th percentile. This dude consistently gave his team so much value from the defensive tackle spot. And really, the only critique I have from him, because his hands are fast and violent. He's got great pass rush moves. He can deconstruct blocks so well. He can hold up well against double teams, and he can absolutely dominate single blocking situations. He has what I think is pretty rare bend and the ability to turn the corner. That's probably the better way to say it. Maybe not bend, but like his ability to turn the corner.
He's flexible
so sharply around the shoulder of offensive tackles. I mean, he saves so much time getting around and to the lap of the quarterback because of how tight of a turner of a corner that he can turn. It is a special gift that he has there. Really, the only thing that holds him back is that length. And sometimes the length shows up when the pass rush moves might not be as efficient. He might not get off them as cleanly, and he can't protect the chest as well as some of these other guys can when they have longer arms, because it's just more difficult I should say it's easier for offensive tackles to get up into the midsection of him and latch on. And so that's sort of difficult for him too. But if you can overlook him having shorter arms, this dude's got all pro ability, and he has showcased it for the last 2 years at Michigan, and he's going to continue to do so at the NFL level.
The meme of the guy and the girl in bed, and they're both looking other directions, and the girl's like bubble says he's probably thinking about other girls, and the guy is a draft fan. It's like if Mason Graham and Will Campbell had longer arms, they'd be the number 1 overall pick.
God, you're so right.
All right.
My two favorite players in this class, if they just had a little bit longer arms, we would without question probably be talking about them as well. I think we're already talking about Mason Graham like this, but like
Yeah.
they'd both be in every single top
Yeah.
five, no matter what.
It would have to be
Yeah,
written in ink.
you're so
Mason
right.
Graham, the grip strength. Go back to the Ohio State game. He erased their run game, erased it. You talked about the solo run stop percentage. He is that kind of disruptor where you look at it. I talked earlier about how Tyleik, you have to play differently against him when you want to run the ball. Mason Graham does that at a lighter weight, but is 50 times a better pass rusher where he never has to come off the field ever. So he's so good. And he's got an array of moves already. We've talked about the two-handed swipe. He could spin off blocks. That grip strength allows him to push pull. You talked about the body angling. That's special stuff. Twitchy. The hands are always going. And I love the pound for pound strength as well with this guy to take on double teams, to kind of drive into the ground and hold. The wrestling background, elite high school wrestler. Like this guy, he has it all. And he plays, 100 miles an hour on every single given game day. So Mason Graham is one of the best players in the draft. He was, I believe, our number one player for both of us coming out of summer overall.
I think so. Yeah.
So it's no surprise to see him hold in a loaded field, hold his number one defensive line spot for both of us.
Really quick before we recap the top 15s here, the player that he reminds me of, Tommy Harris, when he was at his best at Oklahoma and Chicago.
Underrated player, Tommy Harris.
He at his best, man, that dude was an animal. I mean, he was incredible when he was on the field as that sort of same build type of a player, unanimous All-American when he was at Oklahoma, first round pick when he was coming out of Oklahoma into Chicago. And so, when he was on the field, I mean, he reminded me of the impact that Tommy Harris could have. All right, 15 through 1. Recapping this here from me, I got Deone Walker from Kentucky at 15, Elijah Roberts from SMU at 14, Jordan Phillips from Maryland at 13, Omarr Norman-Lott from Tennessee at 12, Alfred Collins from Texas at 11, Josh Farmer at 10, from Florida State, Jared Ivey from Ole Miss at 9, Shemar Turner from Texas A&M number 8, Tyleik Williams from Ohio State at 7, TJ Sanders, Bull Rush McIntyre from South Carolina at number 6, Darius Alexander from Toledo at number 5, Derrick Harmon from Oregon at number 4, Walter Nolen from Ole Miss at number 3, Kenneth Grant from Michigan at number 2, and Mason Graham from Michigan at number 1. Connor, who'd you have 15 through 1?
15, Deone Walker, just like you, from Kentucky. Joshua Farmer from Florida State at 14. 13, Jordan Phillips from Maryland. 12, Omarr Norman-Lott from Tennessee. 11, Jamaree Caldwell, one of 2 Oregon defensive linemen on this list. 10, Darius Alexander, defensive lineman out of Toledo, of course. Number 9, Shemar Turner from Texas A&M. 8, Alfred Collins from Texas. 7, TJ Sanders from South Carolina. 6, Derrick Harmon, the other Oregon defensive lineman on this list. Shemar Stewart at number 5 from Texas A&M. Number 4 was Tyleik Williams from Ohio State. Number 3 was Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Number 2 was Walter Nolen from Ole Miss. Number 1, just like you and just like Summer, Mason Graham.
We would love to hear from you, as always. We ranked our top 15 interior defensive linemen here. We'd love to hear your thoughts as well. We'd love to hear kind of what you guys thoughts of us, breaking down these guys in a little bit of different positions, these nose tackles, 3 technique defensive tackles, 3 forward defensive ends. If you have more questions about that and kind of what goes into it and how I changed my grading scale of certain categories on those 3, fire off the question. I'll be happy to answer those and kind of go into detail of how we do that. I think you guys love when we answer sort of the why of how we are scouting and we get to these points. So if anybody has any questions about that, fire away. But we'd love to hear from your list as well. We also watched a handful of other players who didn't quite make the top 15. We're going to continue to watch defensive tackles. If we didn't get to somebody here on this list, ask a question, fire it off in the comments, let us know, or give us your thoughts on that player. We would love to hear that as well. Audio only, people. Hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Tampa Bay Trey, at Connor J. Rogers. But the best way to get it on the show is the comment section on YouTube, youtube.com/@NFL Stock Exchange. You can also follow us on Instagram. It's NFLSE Show, and TikTok, same thing, NFLSE Show. And that's the same on Twitter as well. Connor, got anything else before we get out of here?
I think I've said all of my words for one 2-hour defensive lineman show. It was a lot of fun. But man, what a class this is.
We knew that this was going to be a beast. There's so many fun difference making, different shapes and sizes and styles, types of defensive linemen that I think are going to make up a good part of the core in the NFL over the next couple of years. And so it was fun to talk about a lot of these guys. We got one more episode for you. A little bit later in the week, we are going to be reviewing another mock draft. I'll leave the suspense there as to whose mock draft we're going to be reviewing.
No spoilers.
No spoilers this episode. So there you go, guys. Didn't have spoilers for you. For Connor Rogers, I'm Trevor Sikkema, saying thank you guys so much for watching and listening to the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. See you guys later this week.